am I going in the right direction? Because, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again, we have one life, we're doing one journey, and we need to be responsible for the journey we're on. And I find too many people go with the flow only to ask themselves after that, why did I do this? How did I land up here? What's happened to my life? There are too many questions that mount up, whereas actually the question should be doing the opposite. Instead of after the fact asking ourselves, how did I get here, or what did I do right or wrong? Why didn't I ask more questions? The question is, where am I going? And with that in mind, how do I then make appropriate choices now? So if you want to go somewhere, you almost need to work in advance and say, how do I plan it, or how do I prepare for this? And I was thinking how there are different levels of questioning, and I sort of worked out 3 or 4, because in each day we have different levels of commitment, of connection. We've had a nice meal, and the connection with each other, the conviviality, that's a good level. The work we're going to do tomorrow is another level. The relationship we have with ourselves is another level, separate from each other. Tonight when we go home, switch off the light, we're in bed alone or with somebody, but we're there and we're in our own little world, inner world. In each level, we're needing to understand that the level is part of a bigger whole, and that the choices in each level affect the whole. Often, when people get to later on in their lives, they say, what do I do with myself now? And you say, well, what do you love? And they say, well, I don't know. I've done this all my life. I've done that. But, who am I without that? Because so much of their character and identity has been formed around that. But one day that is not going to be available anymore, or even preferable. I mean, you'll get to the point where you can't stand teaching, or you can't stand whatever it is, because you've done it, you've finished, you don't want to start new lesson plans, and you've done your time. You've done a good job, but you've also had enough of it. But it's not then stopping and saying, well, it's more an evolution. Because it's you, it's not, if you treat yourself, whatever you invested in is actually you evolving. And so what you invest yourself in evolves with you. And if you treat yourself now, you actually are moving into what actually fits for you better. So we don't do a job because we need to pay the rent until we're 65 and then stop. The rent still has to be paid, and the trouble is we get left high and dry. A lot of people die because they don't have a future. They just don't have something to live for. You can't go and play golf 4 times a week and find meaning. It's nice. It's a pastime. I don't play golf, but I guess it's nice. But we need something bigger. We need meaning. Without meaning, we don't survive. And sport doesn't easily give us meaning. I mean, people tend to manufacture meaning out of competition and trying to be better than somebody else, and that say, oh, well, I'm better than them, so that gives me something to feel good about. But that ultimately can't feed your soul. It sort of keeps you going in terms of the competitive edge and the identity. You have all the photographs of the teams you've been in, and you show people and tell people how you were captain of the Western Province and this and that. But it doesn't sustain the soul. And so that's why I'm wanting to say, what is our social connection? How invested are we, socially? It might be that we're teaching now or building houses or whatever, but then we might find that we become a coach, or we become a mentor, or we become a politician and start tidying up bad parts of our culture or whatever. But those all go together, and they all sort of form a unit, because you can't take them out of context. How I relate to myself affects every other area. How I relate to God affects every other area. But we need to ask ourselves, how invested am I in myself? maybe I'm hard on myself and I push myself and eventually I burn out. And that doesn't help. And a lot of people have got high ideals and they push themselves and come 45, 50, 55, 60, and they're worn out and they're burnt out, and they've usually lost their family by that stage because they haven't had time for their family, and they've worn themselves out because they've pushed themselves so hard, and they don't have much to live for. So, and I'm not saying, indulge self. It's rather have an appropriate relationship with yourself. When Jesus said, love the other as you love yourself, he wasn't saying overindulge yourself, but also don't overindulge the other. Have a good balance and love God and be involved. Care for the poor, care for the widows, care for the children. A lot of our world is struggling because people care for themselves and not for others. So part of this is also saying, how can I still be connected and connecting right through? Because we also think of retirement as a sort of end of something, but we forget that now we still live 30 years beyond that. And that's a hang of a long time to pay the rent if you don't know where the next cent is coming from. And it's also not a good time to be trying to do what we were doing at 30 because we're not interested. And just to be doing it just to pay the rent also is soul destroying. And so how do we really begin to find our deeper self, our deeper love, and make it something that really works for us and makes it the best chapter of our lives? Because I keep saying, the last wine is the best. The last chapter should be the best, not the worst. The world says get out of the way when you're over 45. God says, no, the last chapter is the best. We have the most to give, we have the most experience, the least to lose, but often we sidelined. And unless we make an effort into actually finding our way, we find ourselves sort of getting into a sort of no person's land and try to just survive. Our relationships often deteriorate. I heard somebody the other day say, it's harder and harder to make friends as you get older. We depend a lot on our childhood friends, our school friends, to be long-term friendships. But new friendships, tend to not last that long or go that deep. So on a piece of paper, just ask yourself, even now, if you look at investment, look at time. How much time do I spend doing those 4 different functions in a day or in a week? How much energy, how much of myself am I investing? Obviously, there's a dangerous too much, but also a dangerous too little. And we need to begin to shape our own meaning by our investment. What we commit to exists for us. What we don't commit doesn't exist. And in what's in our head is not a commitment. We can have all the right ideas. It's what we invest ourselves with. Invest is to get dressed in. Vestito in Italian is a dress. So our investment, what we wear, what we live, what we breathe, what we eat, is where we put ourselves, not what we think. And what we think, as we saw with the mind talk, is actually stealing a lot of our reality because we have it all in our head, but nothing's happening.